Hello, welcome back to my hot kitchen. I'm Wendy, and I'm very excited to share tonight's date night dinner with you because tonight's date night dinner has been created by recipes submitted by our viewers on a contest we ran on Facebook. So tonight's romantic feast is going to feature Chef Chris Nicholson's roasted salmon with avocado tomato salsa, Mama Ozzy's smoked Gouda macaroni and cheese with bacon panko topping, and John Long's chocolate souffle done as souffle shots. So let's get started on working on the souffle batter very first. So the first thing that we're going to do is take about 2 tablespoons or so of butter and get them melting in a double boiler. And the next thing to add to the double boiler is chocolate. Now, I'm using a nice quality dark chocolate here. I'm actually using 2 different types just because that's what I have on hand. And what we're going to do is just let that chocolate and butter get all melted and happy here in the top of my double boiler. And then we're going to start working on greasing and cocoa powdering our baking mechanisms. Now you can use a normal souffle dish if you like, but we're going to do something a little innovative in the hot kitchen. We're going to use shot glasses to make souffle shots. So you just want to take a nice little amount of butter and sprinkle the inside of the shot glass with a generous amount of cocoa powder and run it all around in there and tap out the excess so that the inside is all dusted with cocoa powder. I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to be using 8 shot glasses altogether. These are all about 1 ounce, maybe 1 1/4 ounce shot glasses, and they're all made of good quality tempered glass so they can stand up to the heat of the oven. And the cocoa powder is going to give the souffle a little something to grip on as it puffs up in the oven. Now I gotta go clean these hands up. Let's check and see how the chocolate's coming along here. You want to check on it periodically as it warms up and stir it together. The idea is to bring the chocolate and butter to 1. This little large chunk is going to take a little bit longer to break down. When it gets a little smaller, we'll chop it in half and it'll melt right away. Let's move on to the eggs. And what we want to do here is just separate the eggs. We're going to put the whites in a big bowl to beat them and fluff them up, and we're going to put the yolks in a separate bowl here. So I'm going to crack them carefully and separate them lovingly because I don't want to break that yolk. There we go. Now I'm a fan of just using the shells to break everything apart. Oops, that white is supposed to go in this bowl right here. There we go. So let's finish separating out the white. Beautiful. And the yolk back here in this nice, cute little bowl. So the eggs are what makes the souffle work. See, the egg yolks are added to the chocolate to make it kind of custardy. And the egg whites are beaten to a fluffy, pillowy consistency. And that is what gives rise to the souffle. Souffle is one of the simplest chemistry experiments in all time. There we go, I almost put the white in the wrong bowl again. Come on now. Separate out for me. There we go. And that yolk goes in that other bowl. Give my eggshells a little scrape out. Get that extra white out of there. And then we're going to beat them. We're going to add a couple tablespoons of sugar. Egg whites love a little sugar. A little bit of salt to enhance the flavors, just a little tiny bit. And then a little pinch of cream of tartar. All these things go into the egg whites to help them fluff up, well, except for the salt. That's purely for flavor. But the sugar and cream of tartar are all about making the eggs fluff up a little better. And then we're going to crank the speed up and take these babies to stiff peaks. Let's see where we're at. Beautiful. So when the tips stand up nearly straight, when you pull the beaters out, that's stiff peaks. So we're done with the egg whites for right now. And we're going to head back to the chocolate. There we go. That's looking nice and happy right now. Let's go ahead and take it off the heat here. And Bring it over here. And we're just gonna stir it to smooth it out. Let it cool down for a couple seconds, and then we're gonna start adding these egg yolks one at a time. There goes one little egg yolk. Oop. Oh, well, all right, they both wanted to go in at the same time. These things happen. What are you gonna do about it? Work on one egg yolk at a time. That's what you're gonna do. So once you see that you have one egg yolk mostly incorporated, go ahead and start busting up the second one. You're also gonna wanna add about a half teaspoon of vanilla. Could also use another extract of your choice. And just blend those all together. Notice how the color and the texture and the consistency change ever so slightly. And now we will fold in the egg whites. Get them all scraped out, add them all in one shot. And this part takes a few minutes, so just fold very gently, very patiently until everything has come together as one. So you can see that it's all starting to come together, yet it is maintaining a nice voluptuous volume. And I'm just scraping from the bottom, from the outside in, until I see that the egg white is totally combined and there's no more marbling going on. Need that egg white to be mixed in there perfectly so the souffle goes poof. I'm going to switch to a clean spatula at this point because that one is no longer helping. Just keeps adding more little egg white. There we go. See how pretty that is? And now we're going to go ahead and drizzle it into these shot glasses that we prepared with cocoa powder and butter. And we're going to fill them about halfway full. Maybe a little past halfway. See how it just kind of pours out like a ribbon? Nice, huh? So I'm down to my last one here. And what we're gonna actually do with these is put them in the fridge, and we're gonna bake them up later when we're actually ready for them, because souffle is best when it's served fresh and hot. And that is one of the coolest things about souffle on a date night, is you can make it in advance, up to a day in advance actually, and stash it in the fridge. And these little guys will show you the finished product and how to finish them off with a little tasty cream liqueur at the end of the show in those last shots. Make sure you cover it with something. I'm using a sustainable plate. You can use plastic wrap or whatever you have. Just keep them covered and hold them in the fridge until you're ready to bake them. And when it comes time to bake them, you'll want to bake them at 375 degrees. If you're using the shot glass idea, it'll probably take about 15 minutes to bake, maybe 20 if they've been in the fridge. So we have our mise en place all ready for Mama Ozzy's amazing smoked Gouda macaroni and cheese with bacon panko topping. And the first step in this is to get the bacon cooking and the pasta cooking. So I'm going to start off with 2 strips of bacon. Now this recipe was originally enough to make a 9 by 13 pans worth of this amazing stuff. So I scaled it down a little bit so it was more date night friendly. But you feel free to go ahead and make yourself a nice big batch of it because it's pretty incredible stuff. So I've got my bacon searing over medium-low heat, and I'm looking to take it all the way to crispy. And the next part of this is to get the pasta cooking. We're using about a cup's worth of elbow macaroni. Pour it into boiling water. Add a nice amount of salt and a little bit of olive oil to round it all out. Let it cook until the crunch has gone out of it, but not quite till it's done. Give it a quick little stir. And you folks know how the rest of that works. So the bacon's been frying for a few minutes now. It's nice and cooked, Just gonna drain it out on a paper towel here. Oh, come on now. And hold on to all that delicious bacon grease, because the next thing is gonna be about 1/3 of a cup or so of breadcrumbs. We like to use panko breadcrumbs because they have the best texture, but any unseasoned breadcrumb will work. You just wanna toss those in with the bacon fat in the warm pan and give them a moment to soak it all up. You'll notice that there's not a drop of fat left in the pan, it's all in the breadcrumbs. And you wanna brown them just ever so lightly. And after just a couple minutes of that, you can go ahead and pull them off the heat and just put the bacon panko crumbs back in a little bowl. Now we're gonna move on to the sauce. Now it's a pretty basic bechamel sauce, nothing too fancy here. The magic is all in the cheese and the bacon. So we're gonna start with a couple tablespoons of flour and a couple tablespoons of butter. I'm gonna put them here in this pan. And since it's already on a warm burner, that butter's gonna melt very quickly. You wanna stir to combine and just let them cook together for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, just enough time to kind of come together and know each other. Making a basic roux here. And once we see that everything's all combined, at that point you can also go ahead and add in a clove of garlic. You want to work over medium to medium-low heat. Oh, you can smell that getting all kinds of aromatic. And while it's going, go ahead and add about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. A little bit of cracked pepper. You can use white pepper too if you like, but the recipe calls for black pepper. And a little bit of nutmeg. About 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground, or a couple little spritzes of freshly grated. I always like the freshly grated because it's much more aromatic. Once it's ground, it's just not nearly as exciting. And once you see that the roux is just barely starting to turn colors, take it off the heat. Let it drop in temperature a little bit, because the next ingredient is milk. You don't want to scorch the milk. So once you see those bubbles starting to subside, you can go ahead and drizzle in the milk. You're going to use 1.25 cups of milk. I definitely recommend whole milk. Stir to combine. I'm actually going to switch tools here to a little flat whisk. I'm going to put it back on the heat here. I'm going to whisk to combine, dissolve all that flour. Well, the flour doesn't actually dissolve. In all technicality, it's a suspension, but whatever. Bring it all together. Let it come up to a little simmer. And then we're going to come back and add some cheese in. So the bechamel's been cooking for about 5 minutes or so, and you can see that it's thickened up quite a bit here. Now the real test of thickness, at least in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of chefs out there, is does it coat the back of a spoon? Perfectly. So let's take it off the heat here and start adding in the cheese. So we're gonna do 1/4 pound or a nice big full cup, maybe 1.25 cups of smoked Gouda cheese. 1/4 pound, or like I say, big full cup of extra white sharp cheddar. And about 1/8 of a cup of Parmesan. You can also use Romano or Asiago with equally delicious results. You just kind of want to stir that all together. Get it all good and happy. Let the hot bechamel sauce coat the cheese, soften it up, get it all nice and melty, and just stir it until it comes smooth. This does take a few minutes right here. So if after a few minutes you're not quite seeing it come out smooth, that probably means you lost a little bit of heat in your pan. It does happen, especially if you're cooking on a cold day. So you may want to move it back and forth from the burner to being off the burner a few times. The key point here is to avoid bringing the sauce to a boil. Let the cheese melt naturally. So we're going to call this smooth enough to Depending on what type of cheese you're using, you may get a perfectly smooth result, or it might be slightly lumpy. Let's talk about these little brown bits in here. So that's from the smoked Gouda. That's the rind. Now, I like to leave that in there because it adds that extra little punch of smoky flavor. You can peel off the rind if you like, but I think it's delicious to leave in. So now let's add in the cooked pasta and stir it all together with the sauce. Now, doesn't that look like fun? And it's okay that it looks a little soupy because that pasta is going to soak all the goodness up as it bakes. So we're going to take this over here and we're going to put it in a couple little baking pans. You can also do it in one baking pan. I just like the little casseroles because they're cute. And you can see that this is still a nice, generous amount of macaroni and cheese. Plenty for you and your sweetie, and leftovers for later. Now let's finish off the crumb topping here. I'm gonna take these little bits of bacon and crumple them up and put them in the breadcrumbs. You can go small, you can go big. I kind of like random rustic sized chunks. Kind of mix it all up in there. And then, yep, we're just gonna sprinkle this on top of the macaroni and cheese. Put a nice little cap on there. Kind of spread it out. Beautiful. And then we're going to pop these in the oven. Now in casseroles this size, the macaroni and cheese can take about 20-25 minutes to bake. I've got my oven preset at 375 degrees. If you're working in a larger pan, you may need to adjust the time up to about 35 minutes. So with the mac and cheese in the oven, it's time to work on Chef Chris Nicholson's roasted salmon with avocado salsa. Now the first thing we're going to do is put a little spice rub on the salmon and give it a little sear. And let's talk about the spice rub for a second. So we have a little finely minced onion, which I'm using as a stand-in for a half teaspoon of onion powder, half teaspoon of salt, half teaspoon of cumin, half teaspoon of paprika, half teaspoon of black pepper, and a half teaspoon of coriander. And I used whole coriander that I crushed up. So what we're going to do is just stir this all together. And this is such a nice little spice blend. It's got a nice little smokiness from the cumin and the paprika. It's spicy, but not like hot. It's just really nice. So once that's all mixed together, you just kind of want to sprinkle that across the top of the salmon. Now my salmon have skin on one side, so I'm not going to bother to season that side. I kind of like the flavor that the skin offers. Adds a little extra fat, a little extra earthiness. It's really quite tasty. And this is a nice wild caught salmon. That's why it's got such a beautiful color to it. And of course I already went through and removed all the bones with a pair of tweezers. And now that we're all set up here, I'm just going to walk it over here and we're going to do a little dry sear right into the pan. The salmon has plenty of fat in it. It will render out beautifully. And just for good measure, I'm going to go ahead and throw the spices in there too. We're just going to let that sear for about 3 or 4 minutes and develop a nice color, and then we're going to finish it in the oven. And now to go wash off the salmon fingers. Let's take a nice little look here. Oh yeah. Wow, you can smell the cumin and the paprika getting all aromatic and happy. You can see that there's a nice little crust on top. It's perfect. Now here's the chef part. We're going to go ahead and take this and finish it in the oven. This is how a lot of food at restaurants gets made, actually. And this is a good reason to have a pan that can go from oven to burner. And while we're over here, we're also going to pull the macaroni and cheese out because it is bubbly and happy and golden and brown. Yeah, 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 yeah. Now we're going to give the salmon about 5 to 7 minutes to finish off. And in the meantime, we're going to make that avocado salsa. So we're going to start the avocado salsa by combining about 1/4 of a red onion, kind of coarsely diced, and a tomato that has been pulped and also coarsely diced. Coarsely dicing because we want these things to pop as far as the texture goes. We're going to juice a lime into them for brightness and flavor and tastiness. I always like to fresh juice my limes and my citrus because I like to get the little pockets of juice in there. I love it. It's like a little explosion of flavor. And this time we're also going to add a teaspoon of cumin and about half of a diced up jalapeno and about a tablespoon or so of chopped cilantro. And we're going to fold all these together before we fold the avocado in because we want the cumin to soak in with that lime juice. The lime juice is kind of an activator. Not quite as good as, say, heat per se to activate a spice, but almost. And then we're going to take the avocado, which, surprise, I've actually already cut, and we're going to scoop around the outside and get these nice little chunks in here. And you want to fold in the avocado last because it's soft, and you want it to be kind of whole. Well, nice and chunky anyway. Now, it doesn't really matter if the avocado gets smashed up as far as taste goes. It's strictly an appearance thing. So kind of gently fold it in there. Mix it in amongst its friends, the onions and the tomato and the lime. And when you start to see everything's all mixed together and the avocado is just starting to give up its shape, go ahead and stop stirring. So let's check on the salmon now. It smells really awesome. Oh, and it looks really nice too. I'm starting to see a little fat rendered on the surface. It's starting to peel apart. That's ideal. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and pop those awesome little souffles in the oven. Very excited about these. One of the things I really like about this particular souffle recipe is that the souffle doesn't necessarily collapse all the way when it's all done, so it's even better. So pop it in the oven, give it about 15 minutes at 375 degrees, and enjoy later. Well, we hope all of you have enjoyed watching our Hot Kitchen Recipe Contest episode. We know that we had a lot of fun tasting all of your delicious recipes. So this particular meal, we recommend pairing it up with a nice Chardonnay, not too oaky, and call in your sweetie. Sweetie, come get your dinner. Hi, darling.
Hi.
Glad you can make it for our date night.
Wow.
I know. Big salmon, really big mac and cheese. Big kisses for you. Thank you.
It's delicious.
So are you hungry?
I am.
Awesome.
Wow.
I know where to start.
Oh, it's just nice and tender.
Oh, yeah.
This is such a hot kitchen.
So thanks for joining me in my hot kitchen tonight. Have fun turning up the heat in your kitchen, and we'll see you next week. Night-night. kitties.